And certainty for me always has to do with an authoritarian politics. To be certain means to forcibly not see all the ambiguities and paradoxes that surround all phenomena. And the only way you can do it is if you guard your certainty with a gun. So people who are dead certain of what they believe, what they think, how things operate, for me become very dangerous. And you usually find people are more and more certain, they get louder and louder and more aggressive to defend that certainty. There's a very narrow band of memory within which we can exist. We understand if you get some kind of dementia, your memory disappears and you can't function in the world. So you need some memory. If you can never forget anything, you become completely paralyzed by all the memory. So people who are with post-traumatic stress disorders who cannot stop seeing images or reliving experiences, whose memory is so present, they also get completely disabled by the memory. So to chart that kind of memory, there are many people who say that society should mainly try to gather an amnesia. It's the only way to survive, is if you can let go of the past. But I'm not one of the people who believe that. Just in the South African context, there's so many people who want to say the past is the past and has no bearing on the future, when we know without understanding the past, there's no comprehension of where we are now. But I understand the impulse behind it. People said that in cases of civil wars, the society needs to forget their history to be able to survive. Otherwise, all they become is the memory of their history. And to find a way of encapsulating memory in a physical form is one of the tasks of the studio. I think we're very good at inventing and understanding other contexts that aren't ours. That we can read a novel that's not of our world and still follow it and make sense of it. Even if we're imagining half of the circum. I can read a novel set in Sofia or in Istanbul, and even if I've never been there, I form a picture of what that could be, what that life might be, which may be false, may be very different to what somebody there is. But I think that's how we operate, through imaginative misunderstandings of other contexts. I'm very aware also of this being the year in many parts of the world where Black Lives Matter have come to the fore, but in a way, in South Africa, that's been a struggle that's been fought for generations. The whole of the liberation movement here was about that. So it's more the world catching up to South Africa than South Africa suddenly discovering something new. Yes, I think Europe is fighting a rearguard action. There's extreme reaction in Europe. So, I mean, in the broad sense, one understands that over hundreds of years, Europe amassed immense wealth from South America, from Africa, from Asia, from all the different places in which they had colonies and commercial control. And they amassed this gigantic wealth through which they were able to have fantastic infrastructure, great education, great health systems, social welfare. And now when 1/100th of 1% of that population from which they took all that wealth wants to come to Europe to try to share in those benefits, that health, that education, those jobs, barriers are immediately put up. So we've taken everything, and now we put up a wall to make sure that no one else gets near it again. So in the broad picture, it's very clear if you're outside Europe what is happening. And so there is, I mean, we know that all around the world, in America, in Europe, there's huge reaction, and very right-wing populist leaders come to the front. And it always has to do with generating the most ungenerous and the most selfish elements of all people in those societies. But the astonishing thing is that 70 years after the independence of most African countries, 150 years, 160 years since the end of slavery in North America, 130, 150 years since the ending of the Atlantic slave trade, the echoes of these are still so strong. And if you go back, if you scratch below the surface, there are fault lines that come from that period throughout the world. If you look through Africa now, very large numbers of the contemporary power elites were in fact part of the power elites that were the associates of the colonial powers. There are all sorts of continuities that go through history in that form also. So I think that assumptions which people had before can no longer be held. The easy certainties that people in power held about who they were and how they operated in the world. And this is very much connected also to gender politics, to the Me Too movement. I think those do change. They do change. They're not just a flash in the pan. We won't go back to how we were before. People can't pretend ignorance of the larger questions anymore. I think that's the hard thing. There are many different battles, but the clarity of that, the ease of that, the way in which it was so unambiguous made it a much more direct and easier fight. Now there's so much more ambiguity about so many different issues. So I don't think there is the same single battle. You could say it's about education, it's about literacy. If our literacy could go up by a huge amount, that would make a gigantic difference. It's about foreign investment, if that could come up. Should we have more jobs which are less well paid, so people could have jobs? Or do we say, no, all the battles that the trade unions have fought over the last generation should be stayed to protect their conditions of work? There are a series of less than perfect answers, and that makes it much harder. And we certainly have no expectation that the rest of the world is going to be galvanized by our internal politics the way it was in the struggle against apartheid. I think South Africa's always been an interesting and complicated case in the relationship between class and race. And it used to be much simpler, where the bourgeoisie was entirely white and the working class was essentially black. And essentially one can still say the working class is essentially black. But the bourgeoisie is shifting. It's, one of the ways one can look at the corruption that is happening in South Africa, which one would find in all transitional societies like that, is a kind of class formation. If you don't have all the other forms of gaining wealth which people had to make their way into the middle class, favors from people in power, tenders, things like that become a way of getting into the middle class. Doesn't make it less dishonest, doesn't make it less damaging to the communities whose money is being stolen, but it gives it a different shape of understanding the phenomenon. There's a bigger safety net around. Welfare grants are enormous in the country and are an important part of the rural economy. So there, for the large number of unemployed, and there's a huge unemployment here, for the informal sector, which is gigantic, things are still very, very desperate. But what has grown up is there now is a black middle class. Before there was essentially only a white middle class. There is now a very significant black middle class, people in power, people connected to them, and a very large number of people who've come through universities, have, in effect, joined the middle class, who in relation to the majority of the population are themselves in a state of situation of privilege, having had education, having jobs, having an income, having health care, things like that. So you have to understand there are two paths that are going out together, an optimistic one and a pessimistic one, and both of them are true. Overall, you would say at this moment, well, the pessimistic elements seem very strong, but it doesn't mean that the other side isn't still there. And that's one of the great things about the country, is that it still has an open-ended future. Its future will be determined by people's will, energy, goodwill. Well, of course, as for everyone in the world, it's been a remarkable and different year. I do a lot of work in performance and in theatre as well as in my studio. And so in the performance side, I'm very aware of, for so many dancers, musicians, singers, it's been a calamitous year. Everything has been cancelled, a few things postponed, but huge numbers cancelled and income disappearing from many colleagues and friends who are in that world. As a visual artist, to have had 6 months in my studio without traveling, without moving, has been a blessing, has been fantastic. So I'm aware of these paradoxes of how things are. The role of art in this context is the same as the role of art in any context. It's to enable us to have moments of recognition, of understanding what it is we understand, of finding comfort from the way in which different people see a work of art together and find recognition of each other through their joint view into the work of art. These things haven't fundamentally changed. I think that artists deal with ambiguity, which is always about uncertainty, about things meaning more than one thing, about different meanings passing through an image rather than being held by the image. And I suppose the normal practices and ways that a studio works, that writers or artists work, has been ahead of where the world is catching up in a way. At the moment, there's a lot of work that is looked at online, and I'm sure some work will continue to exist in a digital format with people not needing to be physically together. But still, people will come back to wanting to see a live concert, a live performance, to see the material object, to understand that we are in our bodies and not only on a screen. I've always felt that to say one's either pessimistic or optimistic is false, is blinding yourself to something. For every calamitous thing that's happening, there are other extraordinary projects, people, energies that are there trying to make things work. And for every great thing happening, you'd be blind if you didn't also see calamitous things happening at the site. Our lesson is to understand that in the future, we will look back and make sense of it. But at the moment, attempts to say this is what it means, this is what it shows us, is premature. We have to accept our incomprehension at the moment rather than our making sense of it.